Okay, well, why don't we get going? And since it's only a few of us here, how about we do just a really quick introductions? Because I think I know most everyone, but I don't know if everyone else does. And we're all in this work together. So um, I'll start out. I'm Henig Bell with Bike Easy and the New Orleans Complete Streets Coalition. Helping to run this campaign, trying to make streets all over New Orleans safe and accessible for everyone on the roadway. And I'll pass it off to my colleague, Lilith.
Hi, y'all. I'm Lilith Winkler-Schor. I work with Algiers Economic Development Foundation. I'm the program director there. Glad to see we have some Algiers representation on the line. And we've been working with the Complete Streets Coalition for the past year, particularly as the city has been rolling out the Moving New Orleans Bike Initiative in Algiers. So really excited to be here and to talk more about the mini grant. I'll pass it off to my right, Clara.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. Hello, I am Clara H. and I am representing the City of Love Church right here in Carrollton area.
Wonderful.
Welcome. Barbara, can you unmute and say hello?
Oh, yes. Good afternoon. This is Barbara Waiters. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Downtown Development District of New Orleans. We are a business improvement district here in New Orleans focused on economic development and advocacy, and as well as public safety and cleaning of downtown. Bike Easy has been a great partner for us as we move forward in looking at transit and mobility downtown, and looking at ways to have a more walkable and, mobile downtown. So looking forward to learning more about this.
Thanks for joining, Barbara. It's definitely been great to work with y'all. We did a big project with the in 2018, Connect the Crescent, and transforming some of the streets downtown, make them more bikeable and walkable, especially with bike lanes. And Barbara was critical to that, and she helped me get through that. So I appreciate you being here.
We helped each other.
That's right. So we're just doing some quick introductions before we get going, and we're not gonna, we're gonna keep ourselves on time today, just so everyone knows that. But I see Catherine just joined. Catherine, can you unmute yourself and say hello and who you're representing? Or I'll unmute you. Actually, I think I can do that. There you go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Prevost, and I live in the Upper Ninth Ward. And I've been doing some work over here, and I'm starting to work on my Green Street. So
wonderful. Thanks for joining us today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Essence is the last person. Hey, Essence.
Hello, how are you? Hi, I am Essence Banks, and I am representing, I guess, a dual function here because I work in tourism and hospitality, and so wanted to learn more about the program and how our organization with New Orleans Multicultural Tourism Network can get more involved in this initiative, as well as I'm a huge advocate for women in heart health and heart disease, and so wanted to learn more about complete streets and how we can also encourage, our citizens and the community to get out and be healthy and get fit and use the platforms that are available to us. So really excited about learning more and connecting with this great organization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Essence. Definitely look forward to catching up with you more and building on that collaboration. All right, y'all. Well, I think
Rob, we also have Yvonne on the line.
Oh, Yvonne, I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed Yvonne. Here, I'll unmute you. You can say hello. I'm trying to, at least. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. This is Yvonne Mitchell-Grubb. I'm with the Algiers Neighborhood Presidents Council and the Walnut Bend Civic Association.
So glad you're joining us, Miss Yvonne.
Hey, Yvonne.
Hi.
We've got a great group here. Thank you all so much for joining us, taking some time out of your day. really great to get to meet y'all and see some of y'all again.
Yeah, thanks again. So what we'll do on this call, we're just going to go until 1:30 p.m. So what I'm going to do up at the top is share a screen with some slides just to give everyone a sense of the campaign that we've been doing for the last year plus, and just situate you in the work that we're trying to do. And then we'll talk directly about the grant, the Complete Streets Activation Mini Grant that we're hoping everyone can apply for. So let me get that going.
Also, we are recording this webinar right now so that we can share it for folks who aren't able to make it, but just wanted to put that out in the open so y'all know. But please ask great questions so they can be captured, and those that would have similar questions can hear the great answers.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think my computer is working.
Perfect.
All right, great. So I'll just quickly go through these. This campaign that we're doing with the Complete Streets Coalition is, first of all, the coalition is over 24 local organizations working together, all in the hope of improving our streets for safety, for access. And that is not just for, it says here, people biking, walking, and transit, people riding the bus, but it's also for people driving. We're really trying to make the streets better and safer for everyone in all parts of the city. And that's because in New Orleans, we need this work. We're still a dangerous city just for people walking down the street, with a high level of drunk driving, which unfortunately we saw this week with our local council member. So we know this is a real issue. And we have a lot of poorly designed streets, poorly maintained streets, and a lot of people without cars to get themselves to work and to school. And what you're seeing here, this is a map of all of the bike and car crashes that took place in New Orleans and Jefferson Parish over the last couple of years. And what it's highlighting is the fact that the majority of these crashes take place in neighborhoods that are low income, African-American communities, which tend to be right near a lot of, job centers and places where people need to get to work, but that the streets aren't safe and people are flying around, getting hit, whether they're driving, biking, walking, or, getting off the bus and don't have a sidewalk and something happens. So there's a lot of situations, and it's not an equitable distribution of where these injuries and issues are taking place. Okay. And then, there's a huge public health piece of this, which is why a lot of our partners in the coalition are really focused on community health, public health, our elevated rates of hypertension, diabetes, and all the issues that spring forward from there. So if we get people walking, moving, riding bikes, both adults, kids, and seniors, that's going to have a big impact. And then also connecting people to, the health clinic, the grocery stores, having more ways for people to get around to get the resources that they need also contributes to better public health. And it's also a big issue for people getting to work. And we know that to be true, especially with a lot of the housing issues of people getting pushed out further and further away from where their jobs are. Can they get to work via the bus? Or if they want to walk or bike, that's less and less the case. And we need to try to make an improvement there. And yeah, our flooding issues, all of this stuff is related. So if we make progress on these fronts about how we design and build our streets for all people traveling in all sorts of ways, and do a better job creating more space to where the water can flow and sink into the ground in a better way, we're just going to have a much more sustainable, healthy community. So when the Mayor Cantrell came in, her team, she created an Office of Transportation, and they built out this plan for a low-stress biking network that's going to touch every single neighborhood and corner of New Orleans, all of Orleans Parish, East Bank and West Bank. And this what you're seeing right here is the vision into the future. They don't have the funding to build every single colored line that you see on this map, but what those colored lines represent are a mix of protected bike lanes, those new bike lanes with the physical separation between them. That's the purple lines on this map. And then those orange lines are more like neighborhood bike and walk boulevards. So the city's envisioning a way to create on those smaller streets a way to, slow down car traffic, to maybe divert car traffic to the larger streets, so that those streets are going to be much safer for people to bike and walk upon. And we know that's a big issue throughout the city. But what you're looking at here is over 600 miles of improvements envisioned eventually for the city. But the mayor and her team are building out the first, I think 50 to 75 miles, and it's going to depend a little bit on, all the crazy budget stuff and all the things that are happening in our city and the world today. But they're making a big, down payment on this vision this year with, 11 miles in Algiers, and then the rest of those miles of that 50 to 75 miles kind of around the downtown area, extending into Uptown, Mid-City, 7th Ward, 9th Ward, Gentilly. So it's not going to get all the way to the east or to Lakeview or the lakefront and maybe some other further areas this year, but they're doing a lot of work, so we're excited about that. And this just shows some of the treatments that I just described: bike boulevards, protected bike lanes, a lot of improved crosswalks and sidewalks. This is all a part of this Moving New Orleans Bikes initiative with Mayor Cantrell's team. And then this is an example of what's going on right now out in Algiers. Wall Boulevard is getting a neutral ground walking path. It's gonna be the first of its kind on the West Bank, which is great. And then some protected bike lanes on West Bend Parkway, I believe. Yeah, Parkway. And it's hard to make out exactly if you're not used to looking at these things, but those white lines with a buffer, they have those protected, bollards, flex posts that separate car and bike travel. And this is another view of the recently done work on Marconi right by Delgado at City Park. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. So it's all about making people, feel safe, getting on and off the bus, having a bus shelter. There's a lot of floodwater treatments up and down the installations there on City Park, on Marconi. And this creates a safer environment for everyone, including these cars on the roadway that you see, because their space is also much more clearly marked, and they know that the bike rider is going to be over here, I drive over here. It just creates a lot more clarity and safety for everyone. And the people in town are ready for this. 85% believe we should have as many transportation options as possible afforded to the people of New Orleans, however they want to get around, but they should have options that are safe and accessible and affordable for them. And I'll just let you see here that people are also understanding, the benefits of protected bike lanes and the benefits that come along with that. And I will hand it off to Lilith now to discuss the mini grant, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a really exciting part of this campaign, the work that's happening, seeing it put in on the ground, and now this mini grant activation program is a way that we can get more of you all involved in actually celebrating that, making sure that residents know how some of these changes work, make sure that we're excited about what's coming forward. Oh, we got some new folks joining us. Awesome. So for folks that are just joining us, I'm Lilith. I'm with Algiers Economic Development Foundation. We are one of the coalition members for the Complete Streets. Rob just went over some of what the campaign is about, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the mini grant opportunity. Rob, do you mind bringing up your share screen again so that we can go over the grant as well? Mm-hmm. So the link for the application is on the website, and it's very simple. It's a Google form. You can submit it online. We do have a paper copy version that you can download as well. But basically, the application will guide you through thinking about what it is we need to know about a project that you would like to do to activate some area in your community, particularly as it engages with the new improvements that are happening through Moving New Orleans Bikes. So through the application, we're asking you basics about what is your project about, who is doing it, what kind of skills you have, kind of the background around what affiliations you have as a person or an organization. If you're, speaking with your sorority group and you know that a bunch of those folks are going to come, if you're a part of, a social aid and pleasure club, if it's a neighborhood association, let us know who it is that you are trying to reach with this program, this event, this project, and how it will resonate. And then the rest of it is mostly project logistics. So when do you want to do it? Where are you going to do it? How do you think this will impact folks? What are they going to take away from it? What are some of the big milestones? And it's rather self-explanatory. So you can go to that link, nolacompletestreets.org/activation-mini-grant, has all of the information about the grant itself, including the amount of funding, et cetera, timelines, and then a link to the actual application. We also have an FAQ that we are about to put out with some of the basic questions. One thing you'll notice with this application is that it's really flexible. The whole goal of this project, of this program, is to really empower our residents and our key community stakeholders to get engaged in this work that makes the most sense. And we as an organization, as a group of organizations, can't know what makes the most sense for you within your community, so we want to work with you all. The amount of funding ranges from $500 to $2,000. Again, flexible for a lot of different kinds of projects. The average grant size will probably be around $750 to $1,000, just because we know we have a lot of folks that we want to work with. And that's probably going to be largely based on how big of a scale you're looking to reach, and if it's like a longer duration or like multi-neighborhood. So just keep that in mind. We really want to fund everything that it takes to do a project or a program well. And our biggest thing is making sure that we can get enough resources to enough groups so that we can really reach all the different parts of New Orleans. We have 2 rounds of due dates. This first one is obviously July 1st. We did have a rolling application situation going, but for now, because we're so close to the deadline, we will be reviewing all of the applications we get at this point for that July 1st deadline and be notifying folks for August 1st. Then the activation period, you have 3 months to do your project. It doesn't need to take all 3 months, but it could be like a one-day thing, or it could be that whole duration. But that's essentially saying we're hoping that you will complete your project within this time span. We do have a second round of applications that will be due on September 1st with an award date for October 1st to be completed before the end of the year. So that's kind of the basic information. Now we're going to go to some examples. I think some people may not be. Great. Perfect. So now we can go forward to talk a little bit about some examples. Here we have a list of kind of national examples as well as some local ones. Then we can talk a little bit about the first mini grant that we actually awarded just recently, which was one of our rolling applications. So we are lucky in the coalition to have a lot of members who are already doing this kind of work around thinking about what Complete Streets entails. One of our coalition members is Lighthouse Louisiana, and they work with visually impaired folks and folks of different abilities. And one of their continual programming examples that I just really love is this white cane walk. And so what they do is, in order to help decision makers and key stakeholders understand what it means for their constituents, folks with visual impairments, they do this white cane walk. So they had RTA officials experience what it was like to walk around the neighborhood, get on the bus, get off of the bus, commute to work with a white cane, without eyesight, so that they as decision makers can make better decisions for folks that have different abilities. This is a neighborhood walk. It's using public transportation, our sidewalks. It's a really great way to expand how folks are thinking about what streets mean. We just had a meeting with another neighborhood group that's thinking about how this network ties into people in wheelchairs and different physical abilities as well. So how does one in a wheelchair use the bike lanes connect to other assets? So while this is focused on bike infrastructure, this is not meant to just be for bikers or about biking. Can you go to the next slide? Perfect. Ephemera, many of you may have seen this already, but the Lafitte Greenway, is a part of activating their bike and walk path, did some temporary art installations early on. This is an art piece by Brandon Juan Certain, photographed by Jose Cotto. And this was a temporary art display, which I believe that it's actually text that you can see from different sides when you're looking at it, but using recycled plastic. There were 4 other artists that also had pieces along the trail. And this was really meant to be a draw so that folks would come out to the Lafitte Greenway, use the path, look at local artists. So art is, of course, another great way that you can think about getting people to the new improvements. Another one of our coalition members is Girl Trek. They are a fabulous partner. And before we kicked off the Algiers work, back in September of 2019, we did a festival, and as a part of that, Algiers Girl Trekkers hosted a walking tour to walk a path close to where we're having an event to show off areas that would see improvements and talk about what kind of improvements those would be. So there were a couple of stops along the trail that said, okay, this is going to become a more clearly marked crosswalk. This here is going to have flex posts, so it's going to be more separation between the drivers, the bikers, and the walkers. And they were able to point out what some of these different infrastructure improvements would be so that residents in the area would know what to expect, would be able to see what was changing, and just have a better sense of this kind of work going on. This was a recent example that you may have seen from the city, and it was in partnership with Faubourg St. John Neighborhood Association, and this was the Slow Street. So this was a 2-week temporary intervention, partially due or based on COVID and needing more room for social distancing. There were a lot of folks out on the bayou, a lot more folks walking around, and it was pretty dangerous for how packed it was getting. And so the neighborhood association and the city worked together to do a temporary road closure for 2 weeks for one side of the bayou to prioritize bike and pedestrians and only have local traffic. And so something like this would look like temporary, obviously, your neighborhood association, a group of people saying, we want to test this out for a week, 2 weeks, whatever time frame. We want to get data to see if folks like this, if neighbors are on board, and really a way to kind of collect data about how different uses of our roads could help promote biking and health and those sorts of things.
Excuse me. There you go. Okay.
Perfect. We can go to the next one. So this is a project that I had the pleasure of getting to work on with Bachelor LLC, Aaron Chang, and some other community engagement experts as a part of the St. Anthony Green Streets project, which is a small part of the Gentilly Resilience District. And so we knew that there were street improvements coming to the area, particularly around green infrastructure. And a lot of times that can be really abstract when you look at plans from a bird's eye view. When people talk about planting things, you don't know where it's going to go. So what we did is we built these viewing boxes. They were meant to exist temporarily. We built that maybe for about $20 with the plywood and the metal and all of that. And the purpose was that a resident could look through and see in kind of a real life perspective how their street was going to change. So that's a drawing on a transparency so that folks could see trees will go here, water would go here. This is how our driveways would look. And it's a really great way to make some of these abstract improvements go from planning to almost real life. So now we're going to zoom out and go national for a second. There's some really great work that's happening around the country and around the world to support complete streets in this kind of movement. One of those, again, going to the art route, is murals and street murals. And so this is an example in Charlotte. Charlotte has this beautiful rail trail where they've converted a former railway into a bike and pedestrian path. And one thing they wanted to do is they wanted to make it feel like it was more community owned. They hired artists, muralists to paint different ground murals instead of wall murals. And the community actually came out and painted it together. The artist designed it. This is called the magic carpet. And so they had a series of different patterns throughout this trail. It brightens up the space. It's something to look at, maybe encourages people to come out to the infrastructure that they wouldn't otherwise, and a really great way to have some fun with it. And this is our last example, one that I think is really lovely. This is an initiative from the city of St. Paul, so coming from the city side. They work with about 100 poets a year, I believe. They have a contest and it's selective, but people submit poems, the city votes on them, and then they pick certain poems to actually print in permanently into concrete for new sidewalks. So that way there's something exciting to see as you're walking around, encourages people to get out. Recently, what they did is they've now selected poems in different languages, and they're working to showcase all of the different languages spoken in St. Paul, which is a massive number. So thinking about how culture can tie into our placemaking, thinking about how we can create a sense of personal ownership and community ownership over these places. And so I think this is a really lovely way to improve upon our infrastructure and show community ownership. Of course, and this is kind of where we talk about some of the parameters, we are talking about a 3-month activation period. We're talking about $500 to $2,000. We're not expecting something that is permanent and everlasting. We were originally saying temporary, and we got some questions about that, and they were good questions, so we're not specifically just saying temporary. But we want to make sure that folks are thinking about how much money and time is being allotted with how permanent the process needs to be. So in this case, it would take a long time to get city approval to permanently stamp poems into concrete. So what's a way that can be more temporary, whether that's sidewalk chalk project, whether that's stencils and temporary paint, thinking about that approval process for permanent projects that are permanent art projects would take a lot longer. Maybe something like signage or advocating for permanent signage is something that's more feasible because there are already routes to do that. So we want you all in your applications to be conscious of how much time, capacity, and funding there is for this project. There are a lot of really great ideas, and we just want to make sure that's really well linked, and we're able to also have that conversation with you all, what that looks like, what technical support we can provide, as well as coalition members. But yeah, so we can pause there. Those are the basics of everything. And then it looks like we maybe have one person in the chat. Oh, someone running late. But let's open up to questions. You can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself. I think Rob can give us that power. I see a question here from Essence. Is temporary signage approved and allowed for these projects? So in terms of signage, we as the Complete Streets Coalition are happy to facilitate conversations between the city and applicants. So one of the examples or one of the proposals that we know a neighborhood association is thinking about is how to create better signage for how people would connect from bike infrastructure to the levee path. And so that's something that we talked about, what that would look like, whether that's more temporary signage and kind of the like painted sign kind of way that gets hung up, whether that's the route of getting something more permanent that we work with the city on printing. We definitely want to encourage signage, clear posting as a great idea for how to think about these things, and we're happy to facilitate the discussions with Department of Public Works to make sure that what you all are proposing is something that's feasible and something that can be long lasting.
Yeah, and I would just add to that you know, the mayor's Moving New Orleans transportation plan and Moving New Orleans bikes in particular, their main goal with the project, other than improving safety and access, is to connect people to destinations in the city. So jobs, fun things to do, parks. So, you know, when it comes to traffic safety signs, you know, that might be a little more of a process with the folks at DPW. But when it comes to finding, like wayfinding and figuring out great routes and places to go, I think the city is going to be very open to suggestions and working with groups in this coalition.
And one thing I'll add to that as well is that you can also think of this as a kind of model project or as testing something out. So if there's a way to implement this project right now to then advocate and have evidence of like, hey, we tried that out during that mini grant program, that worked really well. let's try to pitch this to have more permanence. That can also be a way to think about using this grant. Catherine?
So slowing down traffic is one of them, and green infrastructure is also one of them?
Yeah, you know, we're the Complete Streets Coalition, and part of what that means for us is we're interested in promoting complete streets as an idea. So that means making the roads safer for everyone and every type of way to use a road, and sustainability, green infrastructure, making sure our communities can last. So dealing with water, trees, I'm trying to think of other elements of that line of thinking, but yes, certainly that counts a lot. The only other very specific piece that we want to make sure that we're highlighting, and not every project is going to highlight this, so Catherine, if you're thinking specifically about a green infrastructure piece, it's not what I'm about to say, but the other piece that we're going to definitely want to lift up is just the bike network as a thing for the residents of the city. But so complete streets and the biking network, those are the things we're trying to lift up here. And then community involvement with those things. Right?
So the crosswalks, we're gonna have to work with Public Works to get that done?
Well, yeah, they have to decide what goes on the street anywhere in the city, but we are working directly with them. So whatever your idea is, you know, if it's a good idea and we all get together on it, then we will have that conversation. But they're aware that we're doing this, they're excited about it, and if it's deemed safe by them and either we're paying for it or it's not too much out of their budget, then it should happen. So yeah, great question. Any other questions from folks?
One thing I want to emphasize from what Rob just said is that, so Rob and I are going to be the folks managing this program. We have a great selection committee with representatives from American Heart Association and Girl Trek as well. And we are also here to provide technical support. And so what that would look like is, you know, we're getting some great applications. We may, if we have questions before the selection process that we need clarifying, we may reach out and say, hey, you know, we're wondering if you could add a little more clarity here or there. And then once the selection process happens, we'll be there to work with folks once we've selected our participants too. So in the conversation of what it means to work with Department of Public Works or those things, that's really kind of the fun sandwiching that we get to do, is working with the city to make sure that residents are empowered to kind of shape this work, celebrate, and have community ownership over it. So we won't leave you high and dry. We want to see good ideas that really speak specifically to community needs and kind of constituent needs, you know, whether that's thinking about walkers or bikers or folks with disabilities, whether that's mothers needing to have better ways to use their strollers. So think about the community that you're a part of and the different communities that you're a part of, and how maybe some of those areas should be represented in this conversation around complete streets, so that we as a coalition, as the city, as residents of this collective city can have a better understanding of the different ways people are using streets. I think that's a really powerful way to use this mini grant.
And
a question from Sarah: flooding is a major concern in Broadmoor. Is it possible to get funding to support community engagement in cleaning catch basins? I also live in Broadmoor, so I'm excited about that idea. I think one thing that we're really focused on, or that's really big for us in the selection, is how does this connect with this network, this bike improvement network, and then how does this kind of push forward the movement for complete streets? And so knowing that catch basins are kind of a continual thing that constantly need to be maintained, there's been some efforts of highlighting that. How would this connect maybe more specifically to the longer conversation about catch basins? I know one thing, for instance, is bike lanes are really hard to use and sidewalks are hard to use if your street is flooded. You cannot use them. So maybe how does how does that connection happen between not having clean catch basins and the impact that has then on mobility? Thinking about what does this do beyond this one moment to really add to the entire conversation of how we should be thinking about complete streets.
Yeah.
Did you have any additions to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good project, and it, I think if we can do what Lilith said, just make that connection, I think it could be a great one. That would seal the deal if it was, like really about the network and like, here's how this whole community is coming together to do it. But, it's right there. So I think it's great. It speaks to, what we want to see with complete streets. So yeah.
One fun thing I've seen in other cities, maybe also in New Orleans, is mini catch basin murals. And so maybe thinking about like what are specific corridors that will be on this bike infrastructure that we're going to want to highlight that need to be continually cleaned so that the bike network is still usable, and thinking about like how a mural or a mini painting, I think I've seen some fun Sesame Street characters, like how something like that might make a more permanent impact or long-term impact around that connection between these things.
Just real quick, and just to say, I think it's it reminds me of something I know we really want to do, which is, and I don't know if Clara's still on, but her representing City of Love, and Sarah, your question about bringing the community out. I mean, that is the key here, activation. That's why it's called the Activation Mini Grant. So even if, if you bring people out and then they're doing a specific thing about the neighborhood or whatever, if that gathering is an opportunity to educate folks about this movement, and then just about, hey, look at that, that's a new bike lane, or that's, where we hope to get a bus shelter installed right next to this catch basin, and that's important because X, Y, and Z. If we're doing that, then we're really doing the work. And so that's why I was excited to see Clara join, and all the great work that they do at City of Love. So I don't know what her idea is, but I'm happy to, work together on it. But bringing the community out, especially when you have a big, powerful community, is, the name of the game. So Claire, let's work together on that,
Kind of in the realm of bringing the community out, of course, there's a conversation of COVID and how that works with being physically distant. At the moment, we are not funding any, for round one, we're not funding any projects that would be large indoor gatherings, just because we haven't gotten the okay for that yet. We know, of course, there's some flexibility in what that would look like over time, but we will be thinking about the parameters of COVID, and we know there are a lot of really creative ways to kind of do things in a different way in terms of physical distancing. So if you have an idea that feels really linked to everyone being present in one spot, but want to talk through it, again, that's somewhere where we can help brainstorm. So we funded our first mini grant, which was an early application for Old Algiers Main Street, and they're going to be doing an open house in 2 weekends to showcase some of the new infrastructure that's come in on Newton Street, and to have an ability for folks to talk with some city officials about what has been implemented, look at what it's like in real life, because those changes will be happening in the rest of Algiers as well. Originally, they were thinking about having it indoor in one of the Social Aid and Pleasure Club buildings, and so now it's going to be mostly oriented towards outside, with people being able to go in for like a little bit, knowing that it's a longer window, so that people might come in kind of 5 people at a time, 10 people at a time over the course of many hours. So those are some of the ways that we kind of talked through things with them to think about what an opportunity would look like to do something during the COVID era. So that is something else to think about in terms of community bike rides or events, but yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions about, the type of project that you're wondering about, whether it's either allowed or, just would fit in the parameters of the grant? Or any question about funding, or, any of those?
In terms of timeline, we encourage folks to apply for round 1 so that we can know all your great ideas. Round 2 will also be happening later in the summer for if, it has to kind of percolate for a bit and you have to see what things are going to look like. So we definitely encourage folks that maybe don't have all the ducks in a row for this go around to think about the fall. One thing we'll add with that is, so right now construction is happening in Algiers and it's going to be happening very soon in Central City on MLK. And so if you are in the Central City area, if you connect in any kind of way to MLK, this is like a really, really great time to jump in so we can have your project align with that. And then Rob, do you maybe want to talk a little bit about if you know the timeline for some of the other ones, just to think about how the city is, of course, the one in charge of it, but.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Yeah, so there are 2 community design meetings that are coming up for East Bank neighborhoods. One is centered around, as Lilith just said, MLK and Central City, and the connection downtown to the CBD. And that one is June 29th. We're going to be promoting these on the coalition's website and social media and Bike Easy as well, and AEDF most likely, although not for the East Bank most likely. But and then there's one for the Marigny. So Royal Street, Elysian Fields, Frenchman, well, not necessarily Frenchman, excuse me, but that area down in the Marigny. And that work is actually going to begin sooner than the Central City work. But that meeting is June 30th. So they're 2 days, 1 day apart, June 29th and June 30th. And again, those are community design meetings, which means it's basically the last best time for folks from the area, business owners, residents, to come in and actually weigh in and potentially affect the design of what's going to be installed before the city really firms up all the plans, and then it's sort of too late to be in, shaping how things are going to look. So definitely come out for that. And those are going to kind of together inaugurate the Moving New Orleans Bikes work on the East Bank, in the East Bank neighborhoods, which will then, start late summer into the fall and into next year. Well, cool. Any other questions? I guess what I would like to say, before we get too far along here is just, this work, this funding is meant to support community and community leaders. So we want to, lift up and help support the work that is being done by yourselves and your organizations, and to make those improvements and to educate folks. So whether, whatever your idea is, let's try to figure out a way, to make it work. We try to do our best to make sure that we understand how to tie it into what we're doing here. But this speaks to so much of what's going on right now, to public health, to COVID, as Lilith was talking about, also to, all of the social movements and Black Lives Matter and social justice and equity. This is about people moving around where they live and like that freedom of movement for themselves, their family members, and like their homes. So this is all related to that. And I encourage everyone to be as creative as possible and just reach out to myself, to Lilith. And, if you're getting way out in the outer space, we'll try to meet you in outer space, but if we can't, we'll try to pull you to that middle space area, so, but before we jump off, I just want to make sure if anyone has any other either questions, comments, thoughts, anything. I don't want to, take up all the time. Barbara, you got your idea ready? Or
I was just thinking, I wanted to reach out to you offline to kind of brainstorm some things, because I know a lot of the projects connect to downtown, right? So I just want to make sure that, we're on the same page. But I do have a couple of ideas, and I'm really thinking that because of the whole COVID thing, we do want to engage people in to come downtown. So I would probably go for the second round, I think, to have more, If I did the first round, I'd probably do something that has to do with banners and promoting you know, the different routes via our downtown banner program, or engaging one of our, I thought about the warehouse in Lafayette Square District Neighborhood Association, like in the Arts District. But I have a couple of different ideas. Something has to do with the infrastructure project that we have, which I'm going to pass by you. But I have some ideas rolling in my head. I'll pass them by you.
What I wanted to hear. Great.
Amazing.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Essence, were you about to?
Oh, Rob, you know what I wanted to let you know? I think it was one of the, I can't remember, but whatever you want help promoting. I know you said one of the connections was to downtown. It wasn't Broadmoor. Which neighborhood was it?
Well, the MLK work. There's
MLK. That right.
You know, a couple different connections to downtown.
Yeah. So let me know, and I can send that to our communications team to help promote some of those things.
Yeah. We'll be sending that out. Okay. I think it's officially confirmed as of yesterday, so I don't think they've even put it online just yet. So.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Was anyone else chiming in? Essence, did you have something or?
It was great information. You know, I already had some ideas circling around in my head, but I have, you know, 2 really good ideas. So hopefully on our call this week, I can run them by you, get, you know, some additional information and insight, just around really, because I'm passionate about several things. You know, when we think about tourism, that's one side of the fence. But for our local community, you know, it's really about, like, even, you know, during COVID times, it's important that we all remain healthy and we focus on, you know, those communities with pre-existing conditions. So that is a huge piece of the pie that, you know, I would like us, you know, to kind of focus on and talk about a little bit more, and how do we get them more engaged and really take charge of their own heart health. So yeah, definitely want to talk more about, you know, some of the ideas, and hopefully there'll be some synergies there.
Great. Yeah. Look forward to it. And I'm sure there are. This is, you know, we try to use the word activation, get active. There's a whole world of thinking behind all that. So yeah, sounds great.
Rob, this is Barbara. I have a quick question. I just got something from Walk Bike Conference for this year. They're going to do more of a virtual conference. Are you guys involved with that, or is there anything locally that because I'm thinking for the second round, maybe there could be some alignment and some workshops or something with that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We should talk with Dan about that. I don't think we had plans to do anything official, but if we could do something virtually, I think that's a great idea.
All right. Well, we'll talk offline. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any last thoughts from folks? Well, if not, we really appreciate you taking the time. We're excited. We've been getting some good applications in, as Lilith said, and she's been doing a lot of work to facilitate this. We already have one going on in Algiers coming up in a couple of weeks, but we're really looking forward working with some of our other partners in the coalition to support you all and the projects and ideas, events, educational work that you're thinking about, and going through those applications, which again, I'll just say, it's a very simple and easy application. It's really not meant to be too tough or too annoying of a process. And we're gonna try to keep it moving in a quick and speedy way. But ourselves and the coalition, and then partners at the city, we're all, really excited about working together with folks. And it's a weird time these days, COVID days, but there's a lot of change in the air, and I think there's a lot of people with some power and hopefully with some additional funding to make some of that change happen, and this is definitely a part of it. So I want to thank you again. And Lilith, you want to add anything before we hop off?
I just want to say that Rob and I both put our emails in that chat box. So before we hang up, make sure that you copy them if you don't already have them. please feel free to reach out to either of us with questions. One thing that we did add in based on seeing some of the early applications we received is we did add a line item or a line to describe what your budget cost is in your budget. So just that way to give us more clarity, the better that while it's a very simple application, making sure that we can understand the full picture of what you're submitting for helps us move through more confidently with funding and all that. So just make sure that the specifics are there, that there's not too many question marks about what something would be used for or how a program would align. So just be really clear, and that will be really helpful for us. But yeah, we are really excited. This has been a really fun process to get to reach out to folks, hear their ideas, chat with people that we maybe haven't chatted to in a bit, and meet new folks. So thank you all really so much for attending, and I hope that we all get to work together.